Hi, I'm Andrea and welcome to Productive C#. In this video, I'm going to talk about the new JSON library, System.Text.Json, that Microsoft introduced starting from .NET Core 3. You might be wondering why Microsoft created a new library, and the reason is simple. They wanted to build a library that is incredibly performant and use very little memory. It's very optimized for using UTF-8, that is the encoding used mostly for web requests and for accessing files, while the most commonly used library, that is JSON.NET, relying on UTF-16. And the other reason is because they wanted to remove a dependency from an external library from ASP.NET Core. And this also gives you the ability to manipulate JSON directly in your .NET application without having to reference any external NuGet dependency. So let's have a look what we can do with this library. I'm going to show you how to serialize, how to deserialize, how to use random access into the JSON, and also how to make web requests. All right, here I have a .NET 5 application, and I have some record types that helps me to measure, to basically save some measures. Each measure contains datetime, a temperature, and a value of risk, that is an enum, low or high. And as you can see, I have some data. So let me try to serialize this data using System.Text.Json. All right, let me create a JSON variable. And in order to serialize some data, I need to use the JSON serializer class that's available in System.Text.Json that I actually added now. I can do serialize, specify the data, and that's it. Super simple. And let me print it out, the value, to the console and run. So this is basically taking the data, record type that I'm using C#9 at the moment, and you can see that I've printed the JSON and it's not indented by default. But we can actually use options to specify how we want, to serialize the data. And that's fairly simple. You can just create an options type, JSON serializer options. And I can specify indent, write indented, set to true, and pass this object in here to the call. I don't need a semicolon here. And run. As you can see, now the JSON is serialized. You probably noticed that enums are serialized as numbers. But you can change that if you want. You can use options. As you can see, there are quite a lot of options. You can specify allowing trailing commas and anything else like ignoring fields or including fields. By default, the JSON serializer only serializes public properties. So if you want to also include fields, you need to use these settings. And if you want to serialize enums as strings, you want to use a converter, for example, and you can create a JSON string enum converter and specify the JSON naming policy camel case. And when you do that, all the time the framework is trying to serialize an enum, it's going to use the camel case convention. Instead of using numbers, it's going to use high and low. That is effectively the name of the values. You can obviously create your own converters. So the usage of the serializer is pretty straightforward and very similar to what you might be used to by using JSON.NET. Then you can also obviously deserialize. Let's try to deserialize and see how we can do it. All right, so let's do JSON serializer.deserialize. As you can see, you can specify the type you want to deserialize into. In this case, we want to use data. Specify my JSON and my options. And there we go. Now I deserialized this JSON that we just created into an object of data. And I can print it to the screen if you. In this case, going to print the content of the object. See, data, name, sensor 1, and a list of measures. Of course, I'm not printing in that because it's an array. And that's how you can do serialization and deserialization. Sometimes you want to read a document in memory, but only access a subset of the elements. So in this case, when you want to do random access to a JSON document, you can use the JSON document class. And let's do that. So I'm going to need to create a document using the JSON document class parse method. I take a JSON, and now I've created a JSON document. I can effectively navigate and read into this document using the API. This is a read-only access to a JSON document. So I can do something like document.root element, and then I can do get property to get particular property. Let's say I want to calculate the average of the temperatures I'm getting. So let me first get the measures. All right. So this is basically getting me the measures property. Let me save that in a variable. Right, I'm getting the measures. Now I want to do measures dot. This is an array, so I need to use the enumerate array to convert that into an array, and then I can use link to select all the temperatures. Get property, and then I can say temperature. Okay. What I get is a list of temperatures. Oops. I can spell it. All right. However, this is not an array of what I expect. This is an array of JSON elements. So each JSON element have a method get that allows you to get the actual value. In this case, is an integer. So I'm gonna take that as an integer. All right. And then what I can do, I can just simply print temperatures.average. All right. So let's run it. I have only two values. Oh, something didn't work. The given key was not present in the dictionary. So as you can see here, we are using temperature and measures. So I might have not specified this correctly. In fact, one important thing, this library is case sensitive. So you need to specify the property names exactly as they are in the JSON text, and now it works. And the average is 35 because we only have 50 and 20 as values. Finally, I wanted to show you how you can actually invoke a REST API and get the result as JSON. So for this purpose, I'm going to use this website, JSON placeholder. That is basically a simple fake REST API that we can use for testing. I'm going to use the post request and specifying a particular post, let's say number 1. So I want to do a request to this URL, a get request, and basically pass this JSON. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to copy this URL and then use it. Okay, let me do a request. I create an HTTP client object, and then now there are some extension methods that helps me to basically use the System.Text.Json when I deserialize a request. So I can do a get, and then I do from JSON async. Then I specify the type I want as a response. I don't have this type yet. Let's call it post. Oops, post, and then I specify the URL. Right. So this is effectively how you can do a request. So let me generate this post type. So I'm going to use records again. And let's say I don't care about all the data. I only care about the ID and the what was the type? The ID and the title. There we go. Now I've got the response, and I should be able to print it. See what happened. Made the request, and then I get post ID 1 and the title from the request. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show you about System.Text.Json. So you can use this library very easily. You can create a .NET 5 application. You don't need to reference anything, and you will be able to serialize, deserialize, parse JSON documents and navigate through them, make HTTP requests and parse the result into JSON. Effectively, you can do pretty much what you need when you want to work with JSON. However, it's also important to mention that this library is not as powerful as the very popular, Newtonsoft.Json library, the JSON.NET. And if you go to this URL that is available in the resources, you can see what's the difference between Newtonsoft.Json and System.Text.Json. Microsoft documented it very well in a table here. On the left, you can see the Newtonsoft.Json feature and what the equivalent in System.Text.Json. So if you want to port an application that is using Newtonsoft.Json into System.Text.Json, you can have a look at this table to see what's supported, what's not supported. Also, Microsoft is adding new features as the new release of the framework will occur. But most of the scenarios are covered. But if not, be aware that this table is incredibly useful for you to make a decision. Thank you very much for watching. That's it.